Well, folks, the college football playoff rankings committee did it again. They did it again, and I don't know what to make of it. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Indiana somehow won 6 out of their 7 games, lost to the third best team in the country by 7 points, and ended up in the Outback Bowl. I'm sorry, Hoosier Nation. I don't know what to tell you except welcome to the 174th edition of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many people across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on December 22nd, 2020, where I'm your host, Nithin Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my usual podcast co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, I'm just going to hand it off to you here. Look, you were away last week, had Noah on talking about the CFP committee and the craziness involved there. I'm just going to hand it off to you. Take it away. I mean, try making sense of this if you can. I don't know.
Yeah, there's really no making sense of it, right? And the IU ends up. I'm happy where they end up. I was actually gonna be happy wherever they ended up if they didn't end up in the Year 6 Bowl because I live in Florida, right? I go to the game and they'll have fans at the game. I'll be covering it for Indiana HQ. It's gonna be a blast for me personally. However, for the program, the Fiesta Bowl would have gone leaps and bounds for growing the program. So it's obviously extremely disappointing that we didn't get a New Year's 6 shot. However, having sat on it for some time, I haven't informed Nithin of this take at all for some time. I actually think it's fair that we got kept out of New Year's 6. I think it's fair because especially with their reasoning. When you look back, we needed some things to break our way. We needed Notre Dame to beat Clemson, to knock Clemson out of the playoff, and thus North Carolina would be going to the Orange Bowl. It would be Clemson going to the Orange Bowl. That would open up a spot for us that we would have obviously taken. We needed, well, some people will say we need Iowa State to win, but to them I would say they ranked 2-loss Oklahoma ahead of us. They ranked 2-loss Iowa State ahead of us. Either of them losing, obviously Iowa State loses and they're still in the Fiesta Bowl, I think is fine. We could have used Cincinnati losing. They didn't lose, obviously. They had a close game with Tulsa, but, pulled it out in the end. There was a couple opportunities, but for the most part, it was a chalk day. And it stayed chalk, and they had IU sitting on the outside. And to be honest, it's really unlucky, but our schedule didn't break the right way as it should this year. We have the one loss to Ohio State by 1 score. People can point out the strength of record if they want, but these people, the committee, watch a billion games, and some of them have ulterior motives, but they watch a billion games, and so they're going to remember the ones you win, and they're not going to really remember the ones that you lose. IU losing at Ohio State by 7 points, even though I am assuming it's going to look like a pretty decent loss when Ohio State, I think, makes the title game.
Yep.
Yeah, you heard it here first. I think they beat Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
But when they make the title game, it'll look good. But in the eyes of the committee right now, especially with an Ohio State team that has gotten so much bad press as of recently, looks terrible. So it makes a lot of sense to me that IU ends up not going to a New Year's 6 Bowl. Is it disappointing? Yes. Is it bullshit? Yes. Yeah, it is absolutely BS.
Cover your ears, kids.
But it's unlucky the way college football broke for us this year. And if you want to blame it on anybody, blame it on the Big Ten for not going to bat with us, for us. You can name on what's his face from Iowa. Gary Bartra?
Gary Barta, Barta, yeah.
Gary Barta. You want to blame it on him? That's fine too. I'm all in on the I hate Iowa now parade. But it's more about the Big Ten not going to bat for us. They didn't go to bat for us. They didn't help us with the conference, championship hope, right? And I get the whole decision to let Ohio State in, but if you're going to let Ohio State in, you got to go to bat for us when it comes to the New Year's 6. I obviously either didn't swing or swung and missed for us. And when looking further down the line, I alluded to this on my Twitter. If you haven't followed, it's right down here. Previously, when this came out and all these news came out on Sunday, that maybe IU, and I know this is mutiny to some people, should look at possibly switching conferences and moving our brand somewhere else. Because if the Big Ten isn't able to go to bat for us or is willing to go to bat for our football program, why the heck are we staying in the Big Ten? Like, what are we getting from them? We can go and get the same thing from the ACC, and they can get 3 teams in. They can negotiate contracts that'll get them an automatic team into multiple bowls, not just one New Year's Six bowl, but multiple bowls. The Big Ten doesn't have that. The Big Ten has one exclusive deal, and that's with the Rose Bowl. As contractually obligated this year, the Rose Bowl is obviously part of the playoff, and no others. The ACC has multiple bowls like that. I think it's BS that the Big Ten doesn't. We're a better football conference than the ACC has been the last couple of years, just from a top perspective, right? From a depth perspective is what I mean. We've been better than the ACC has. Obviously, Clemson has won a couple national titles in the time. Florida State has won a couple national titles in the time. Yeah. I think it's absurd that we didn't make it, but I also think it's absurd that this conference and the leadership of this conference didn't go to bat for us enough and hasn't had the foresight to look forward into the future and go, well, you know what? When the Rose Bowl is in rotation, right, and is part of the college football playoff, we should probably guarantee ourselves at least one other team make it into New Year's Six. It's absurd to me, Nithin. Yeah. Please help me out with this.
No, I get it. I mean, there's a lot to digest even from Sunday, honestly, and you could almost sense this becoming inevitable, that Indiana would get kept out of the New Year's Six as long as some sort of crazy result didn't happen over the course of that conference championship weekend. Indiana's biggest break may have been Florida losing at home to LSU 2 weeks ago, and we saw how the committee treated Florida there. Just to set the scene a little bit, guys, right? So the week 9 of the Big Ten season finished and conference championships concluded, and Indiana finished the year 6-1. And the AP poll had him at number 7. They kept him at number 7. The coaches poll dropped him a spot to 8. But the CFP rankings committee decided Indiana was still 11th, and they gave those at-large bids to 3-loss Florida and 3-loss Iowa State, and even a 2-loss Georgia team that had an incredibly weak resume as far as the teams they beat. Now, the one thing I disagree with you saying, Matt, is that all in all, this is a fair result because, Indiana didn't have that sort of impactful.
No, okay.
So what was, when it's all said and done, Gary Barta's biggest argument was Indiana didn't have the wins.
And I think that goes along with the people that they put in. That argument stands. We didn't beat anybody. We had big wins, but in the landscape of college football, you want to beat winning football teams, and we didn't beat winning football teams. Now, if you want to have the argument that we beat them, and therefore they played, like Wisconsin played an odd number of games, and that's the reason why they had a losing record, then yes, that makes some sense. But in the eyes of the committee, who are knuckleheads at times, that reasoning makes sense.
That's maybe is how they look at it, but at the end of the day, it's just objectively wrong because here's the deal: if Indiana didn't beat anyone, well, Georgia didn't beat anyone, and Iowa State didn't beat anyone. Let's make it real, okay? Texas wasn't a great team this year. Oklahoma wasn't a great team this year, and all of a sudden, you're also going to ignore the teams people lost to.
Yeah, but their argument is that Texas is not a great team this year, but they're still ranked in the top 25 and still have a winning record. That's the point. If Maryland somehow doesn't lose some stupid games and has a winning record, then we can brag about our Maryland win. If Wisconsin had played more games than they did, they would have had a winning record. If Penn State didn't, I don't know what they had at the start. The things in college football this year did not break IU's way to make the New Year's Six. It's unfortunate. I think we deserve to be in it. But in the eyes of the committee and the way they had been judging it all year long was that they were going to value how you finish the season and if you won a couple big games.
Yeah, it didn't break
one shot at that, really.
it didn't break IU's way, not because of that criteria, but it didn't break IU's way because the committee had a long time bias this entire season. That's why it didn't break IU's way. The committee was biased towards the SEC, and they were biased towards the Blue Bloods. And at the end of the day, that's the reason Indiana's not in the New Year's Six. Because
But
here's the deal:
always biased
Indiana,
that way,
one of the metrics that I enjoy looking at is the strength of record. And when you look at that, Indiana, according to ESPN, the channel that broadcasts the college football playoff rankings every single week, they say Indiana's got the 5th best strength of record in college football, which is not just how tough is your schedule, but what do you do against that schedule? Yeah. And look, Indiana should not, under any circumstances, be penalized for teams like Penn State or Michigan or Wisconsin losing games after the fact, especially in this season. And this is where I think we have to look at 2020 in a vacuum. Once teams like Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin lose a game or two in this particular year, the incentive for them to keep playing and to keep the pedal to the metal is gone in 2020 compared to previous years. You don't have that camaraderie with your teammates. You don't have that extra motivation to keep playing your hardest and to get that traditional 5-3 finish in Big Ten play or 6-2 finish in Big Ten play, or to get that quality bowl game. Indiana this year beat blue blood programs in Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin when they were all ranked. And here's the deal. A team like Georgia, which got in with 2 losses, should not have gotten that bid over Indiana. Never mind the fact that Iowa State, the team that really Indiana was compared to for the most part, lost to Louisiana, Oklahoma State, and then Oklahoma. 3 losses in any conference under any circumstances, whether you beat Alabama, Florida, or whether the losses come to Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, or whoever, should never have precedence over a 1-loss Power 5 conference team. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's fair. I think it's biased, and I think they completely missed the spot.
I obviously don't think it's fair. I agree with you, but I'm saying, and what I was saying to clarify my point was that in the way the committee had looked at it all year with their obvious biases, but they always have this bias, by the way. It's the reason why the SEC has, for the majority of the playoff, gotten 2 teams in. The SEC, also has won 10 of the last 15, or maybe it's 9 of the last 15 national championships, which is absurd, by the way. Anyways, they have an obvious bias towards the SEC, but they really should just have an obvious bias towards Alabama, because Alabama is the one that carries the SEC for the most part, and had LSU as a surprise title contender, and occasionally Florida and Auburn's there. But Alabama. But they have an obvious bias with the SEC. What happened to us this year is we didn't have another team that did somewhat decent to help us out. We didn't get a break. We could have gotten a break by Penn State. I don't know, not having a meltdown and going 0-5 and then suddenly realizing that they're a decently built football team and winning 3 games. To me, it's just extremely unlucky the way it unfolded this year. You need some help to help you combat the committee's stupidity. We didn't get any help to combat the stupid. All we had was all our schedule gave us this year, thanks to the Big Ten, gave us a whole lot of excuses for the committee to use against us. And that's really sad because we played Ohio State extremely close. And to your point about Georgia and to your point about Iowa State, and another thing the committee talked about was the way that the teams are finishing their years. And whether it's fair or not, I absolutely think that they factored in us losing Penix and having a backup QB that we went to Wisconsin and won with in the freaking first place. But having a backup QB in, they factored that into how we were finishing the season. We weren't playing our best football because we didn't have our best player on the field. And that is unfortunate that they took that and used that against us, or it seems like they did. They won't say that they did, but they placed an Oklahoma team that has 2 losses, yes, but has been peaking. Some people thought they might even get college football playoff conversation, which is absurd for a 2-loss team, but they were playing much better. A Georgia team that looks so much better with JT Daniels at the quarterback. Stetson Bennett was not a good QB. He showed that off. JT Daniels has looked fantastic for Georgia. Georgia's going to stomp Cincy into the ground, I think, in that football game that they play. And then you have Iowa State, who finished the year beating Oklahoma, and they lost to Oklahoma to finish the year. Yes, they started rough. Yes, they lost to University of Lafayette. And yes, I think we should have been in over them. But they lost in a close game in the conference title game to Oklahoma. They finished the year. They mollywopped multiple opponents before they played Oklahoma in the Big Ten. I remember they took it to West Virginia, who's not a bad football team at all. So sadly, things did not break the way for IU. We didn't have another team that did semi-decently who we played other than Ohio State. And we played them close in Columbus, and we still didn't get credit for it. Why? Because the committee was looking at wins and not losses, which I think is ridiculous because there needs to be some context.
Well, that's where I say, I understand the committee's always been biased, but this year was extraordinary. Bad. This year is a year where the committee made exceptions they haven't made before. For example, it's the first year that the Big Ten didn't get two teams in the New Year's Six.
Yep.
And first team. It's the first year you're 3-loss 5 teams get ranked as highly as they're getting ranked. So, I guess maybe just why bother ranking teams and playing games in September anymore, right? Or in late in the first month of the season like we had this year in late October, early November, if those games just aren't going to mean anything. And I guess that's where we are at this point. As long as you win a bunch of games down the stretch, as long as your guys stay healthy, then you're going to get a New Year's Six bid. Something that I don't quite understand. I do like how you talked about your finger is pointed mostly at the Big Ten.
Yeah,
you're saying that the Big Ten office, especially Commissioner Kevin Warren, is the guy that Indiana needs to be most upset with. And we went out on the Indiana HQ Twitter. You can also find it on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound. And we said, hey, look, Indiana and Tom Allen and the players and the staff can blame a whole lot of people for Indiana's New Year's Six snub. But at the end of the day, who or what is to blame the most? And right now, Kevin Warren, as well as the CFP rankings committee, are getting about an equal percentage of the votes. We've got over 200 votes in. The committee is leading the way with 40%. Kevin Warren's at 37%. Now, the choice that's coming in third is something you talked about just a moment ago. With Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin losing a bunch of games, well, that did play a role. And 12% of people said that was the most important. And then the fourth thing is something that Rob, our friend here, has mentioned in the comments section, a general lack of program pedigree. And that's something where Indiana has not had any over the course of the last few decades. Indiana, as Rob said, is trying to change decades worth of a bad reputation in just 1 or 2 seasons. That choice came up with 11%. So, you talked about Kevin Warren, Matt, and make no mistake about it. The Big Ten made a lot of mistakes, not just with Indiana in general. I mean, consider some of these big picture problems with the Big Ten, right? For example, a lot of teams played just 5 or 6 games. I mean, there is a conceivable situation where Ohio State, let's assume Ohio State was unable to play in the Big Ten championship game because of COVID-related issues. It was possible. I mean, they had 22 players inactive for that game. How would the CFP rankings committee have judged a 5-0 Ohio State team that was unable to play in the Big Ten championship game? The Big Ten only had one New Year's Six team in. They may not even have had one playoff team in because of their strange and unusual alternate plan to this Big Ten in the COVID universe that fell way short of what the SEC did, what the ACC did, and things like that. I mean, the Big Ten doesn't even air football games in prime time down the stretch. The biggest games of the year under normal seasons that are in November don't get televised in prime time because of this old-fashioned traditional way of thinking. So, Matt, what was the Big Ten thinking all along? What was Kevin Warren doing? I know it's hard for him in his first year as commissioner during a pandemic. I'm sure a lot of curveballs have been thrown at him that he wasn't anticipating. What sort of things could he have done to elevate Ohio State and Indiana and Northwestern, teams that did the best in the conference, to where they deserve to end up rather than where they eventually ended up?
Well, that's an easy question. Thank you for pitching me a softball, Nithin. And that is, keep the schedule you had in the first place. Like, you changed your mind 25 times. Like, stop changing your mind. Stick to something. Have a backbone for once. Please, somebody in leadership anywhere, have a freaking backbone. You come up with a schedule that has 2 built-in bye weeks so that, we have COVID. We got to sit out for 2 weeks. Oh, that's great, because guess what? We have 2 bye weeks. We can move those games to our bye weeks or reschedule with somebody that also had a game. So we'll get the 8 games scheduled in. I think it was 8 or 10. I don't remember what it was at the first. I think it was 8. We get our 8 games scheduled in. You had 10 weeks of the season. But, oh, no, we canceled it because things are looking bad, right? And we don't know if we're going to play, but every other conference says they're still going to play. Why are you changing your mind? Have a backbone and stick to it. Stay with something. The same thing that happened to us with the rules with COVID-19, where they changed the restriction for the title game. The same thing that happened with right now, which is we changed it from 21 days of protocol to the 17 days of protocol for COVID-19 to sit out. Just have a backbone. Figure it out. Just if you make a decision, stick with it. If you stick with it, nobody has a problem with you sticking to the rules that you have set out. It's when you change it and then change it back and then change it again that everybody's like, what are you doing? So it's absurd to me that somebody can sit in a position like the Big Ten commissioner, who has the power over the schools that are in the Big Ten, big conference, big businesses. That's what they are, really. Huge, humongous corporations, schools, whatever you want to call them, right? Sports entities. And have the ineptitude to just change your mind and at will, and that the schools will put up with this. It's absurd. Like, I don't blame Nebraska getting mad. I don't blame them. It's fun to make fun of them for it because they were terrible. But I don't blame them. I don't blame Ohio State for getting mad. They had a chance at the national championship. They still have a chance at the national championship. I would be mad too when they changed it at the beginning. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's millions of dollars on the line, if not billions of dollars on the line for the Big Ten. And he's just sitting there changing his mind willy-nilly. We really have to have a talk. If Kevin Warren is really the person that needs to be leading the Big Ten or have any say at all in anything in college football related, his lack of a backbone is actually backbreaking at this point. It's absurd.
Yeah, Indiana.
I used absurd way too much in this podcast. I apologize.
It's incomprehensible. It's inexcusable.
It's inexcusable. It really is.
Indiana has plenty to be upset about. And look, Tom Allen took the high road in his meeting in his session with the media back on Sunday night after everything went down. He said, "Look, there'll be a time and place to get angry and to get upset and to talk on end about how I feel about this decision, but tonight, as he was speaking as of Sunday night, was not the time and the place." Was the quote that Tom Allen used. So you just have to give him benefit of the doubt. That's always a good move. He knows when to sort of use his turn on his emotional switch. It's been loud and clear as far as how Indiana's players have responded to him and how the program has improved over the course of the years. But yeah, I mean, I understand it's a hard job, but Kevin Warren has done significantly poorer a job than other big Power 5 conference commissioners. Like I said, he was one bad break away from Ohio State potentially missing out on the playoff. Clearly, the Big Ten only has one New Year's Six bowl team in play right now, and all in all, it was just a really poorly done job. And again, it was very frustrating to me. I thought one of the most disagreeable parts of the whole plan was to just cancel games because of COVID related reasons, right? There were a number of examples of this where if Team A gets COVID, and that's part of life nowadays, and that's something you have to deal with. If Team A has a coronavirus outbreak, well, then all of a sudden Team B, who is scheduled to play Team A, can't play for the weekend. The game between those two teams, you can use whatever hypothetical you want. Ohio State, Maryland had this. Ohio State, Illinois had this. Indiana had it at the end of their year, although it seemed like both Indiana and Purdue were both dealing with an outbreak. Again, if Team A had a coronavirus outbreak and Team B was scheduled to play them, the game got canceled and Team B wasn't able to go out and schedule another opponent, whether it's non-conference or conference, for that weekend. So, the Big Ten didn't have non-conference play, for example. Iowa State was able to go out and schedule Louisiana. Even though Louisiana won that game, it at least looked like, okay, Iowa State went out and played a good team. They lost to them, but you know what? Credit to them for playing a tough opponent. Credit to them for going out and playing a tough opponent. So let me ask you this, Matt. Let's zoom out even further. Okay, let's take out Selection Sunday and let's take out the Big Ten. Let's zoom out even further. The college football landscape needs to be changed. I mean, this is just 1 year where we're talking about this. The 1 year Indiana's in the mix for sort of a big-time New Year's Six bowl, and it's exhausting. I mean, there is so much subjectivity, and like you said, there's so much bias, and there's so much this, that, and whatever. Is it time to expand the playoff? And did the college football governance, whoever that may be, screw up by not expanding the playoff for this year?
I think they did for themselves, because I think it would have been a lot easier decision this year to find the 8 teams. I've always been a huge proponent of the more teams, the merrier. I think playoffs are fun. I think giving more teams a shot at a title game is great. And if they only win one game, they still win a bowl game, right? And then everything else is an extra. So you make those, what are semifinals or quarterfinals or whatever. I think it's quarterfinals. Bowl games. So that if you have a shot at a bowl game, great, you win. Okay, you move on to the next. It's just, cherry on top of the cake. Cherry on top of the ice cream, as they say. So I would like to see an 18 playoff. I've seen somebody float the idea of a 24-team playoff. I kind of genuinely like that idea, but at the same time, you're adding a ton of games to the 24-team playoff, so you'd have to shorten the regular season to like 10 games, and then 12 games is fun because then you have 3 non-conference games, and the 3 non-conference games or 4 non-conference games, depending on what conference you're in, are always fun. So I see the pros and cons with each, but I think the 8-team is probably easier. So the 24-team one would be a lot of fun and would make the top 25 rankings, like the whole rankings, make a lot of sense.
Right, of course, right, yeah.
And the poor 25th team would be the team that gets let out. There's always going to be one team that's mad that they got left out. There will always be that one team. This year it was Texas A&M. Yeah. I know previously it's been teams like Ohio State was actually left out one year. I know, even though it seems like Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama are just locks every year to make the playoff. And that's what's made this boring. But an 18 playoff would be fun. It would give multiple conferences the ability to get 2, maybe even 3 teams in. It would give you'd save a slot, I think, if you have an 18 playoff, 1 slot for the best of the group of 5. Yeah. So that means the UCF from a couple of years ago that was undefeated that wanted a shot. That means Cincinnati this year that I think deserved a shot, won't get a shot, and will get obliterated by a team in Georgia who I think is going to be a preseason national title favorite for next year. And I think it makes college football more fun. You have 4 big games around New Year's. You have another 2 big games later on, and then you have the big game, obviously, 2 weeks after that. 8 teams would be fun. I think 8 teams we were talking about when the playoff first came out in the first place, that 8 teams made sense. I remember a lot of people were like, what if we did a 4-team playoff? People were like, no, forget 4 teams. Like 4 teams, because then the 5th team gets let out. Just make it a top 8. Because there's almost always a consensus top 8, 9, and 10 are kind of like, oh, they squeaked into the top 10. There's always a consensus like top 6 or 7 teams in that range. Yeah. And then there's the leftovers, right? And I would genuinely like to see college football change that. And I would also like to see them welcome the American Conference into what's going to be the Power 6, because I think the American Conference has gotten good enough that you can now say that they are a power conference.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, Matt. Grow the playoff, expand it, make it 8. And I mean, maybe you even go bigger than that, but at least give me 8. I mean, it's high time. Okay, it's high time, and I love the idea of giving the group of 5 an automatic berth in there. And you say Georgia's going to smash Cincinnati. I'm not so sure, but we'll talk about that. We've got a couple weeks before that game. We'll address it on a later episode. It's high time you gave us a bigger and badder and more awesome playoff. Okay, every sport in 2020 to a large degree has expanded their postseason, and this is where I think college football really missed a chance to experiment this year, because Major League Baseball expanded their playoffs to 16 teams. The NFL's added a 7th team in each conference to take a shot at the Super Bowl. The NBA did the same as well when they were in the bubble in Florida a couple months ago. Also, side note, can't believe the season started tonight, but we'll set that aside as well.
Good game.
College football really screwed up, and they're still screwing up. And I'm just going to say this, okay? I don't know how many fans out there are listening to our show that are big fans of sort of the big heavyweights, the Ohio States and Clemsons and Alabamas and all that. But, 50 years ago, boxing was a sport that was huge in sort of the sports culture of the United States. Yeah. And you're big guns, right? You're Muhammad Ali and George Foreman and Joe Frazier and all of them were huge household celebrity names, okay? But, over the course of time, fewer and fewer fans gravitated to boxing. They lost a lot of the people that loved that sport the most, because there was so much bias and so much controversy and so much subjectivity in deciding who the best boxers were, okay? And 50 years ago, if you walked up to someone on the street and said boxing was going to become irrelevant by the time 2020 turns around, or frankly even 2000 or 2010 turns around, they'd look at you funny. Yeah. It's crazy. They say, who the heck is this guy? And I'm saying, unless college football makes a big change, whether it's expanding the playoff or leveling the playing field at least to some degree, college football's in danger of being the new boxing, where in 50 years, perhaps an amateur professional football league pops up, something like the G League and the NBA. Who knows? Even if that doesn't happen, college football's in real danger of losing a lot of the people that love to watch that sport. And look, I understand Clemson fans and Alabama fans and Notre Dame fans and Ohio State fans are happy at how this went, but there are a lot of fan bases that were very upset with how this rankings situation went down this weekend, whether it's teams that had a dog in the fight like Texas A&M or neutral fans. Like Florida State has no reason to care about this, but their fans were upset on Twitter about how this went. Mississippi State fans were upset on Twitter, and Boston College fans were upset, and national media writers were upset because they could tell that there was just a whole lot of swings and misses by the CFP rankings committee. And look, the one downside to expanding the playoff that you always hear is, you might get more blowouts. You're going to get more bad games. We get a ton of blowouts even now. I mean, what'd you think LSU 63, Oklahoma 28 was last year? That game was a blowout. The score was closer than the game really was. And you had Clemson a couple years ago beating Alabama 44-16 in the national championship game, and Clemson beat Notre Dame 30-3 before that. And Clemson shut out Ohio State 31-0, and Bama beat Washington 24-7 in 2017. These were lopsided college football playoff games, even when it's a Final Four. So you're going to get blowouts, but you might also have the upside of really cool storylines and having more objectivity in your system and getting a true, honest winner rather than whatever you have right now. So I wholeheartedly agree. Give us eight teams at a bare minimum starting next year, if you ask me. I mean, are you on board with that?
Of course. I would have started 4 years ago. And I think we had a bit of a honeymoon period with the 14 playoffs. Sure. The first year was Oregon, Florida State,
Ohio State,
Bama. Yep. And Florida State and Oregon haven't been back.
Nope.
I mean, maybe Oregon's been back once.
No, they haven't.
They haven't really.
Nope.
And the Pac-12 has really gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to the playoff. They haven't been great. I mean, you want to talk about college commissioners that are hated. Larry Scott is at the top of the list. But I think more parity and more opportunities, really, not parity, more opportunities in college football for big games and playoff games and to draw in some of the neutral fans of the sport. Some of the people who enjoy a nice NFL football game, but didn't go to college. You need more of these opportunities. A number 1 versus number 2 regular season matchup, Clemson, like Notre Dame matchup, like it was this year. It wasn't 1 versus 2, but top 10 matchup. That's going to get the NFL.
Of course, yeah.
Fans and non-college
or
football
neutral,
fans to watch.
Casual,
yeah, and like you said, for the future of the sport, the more opportunities you get for that, the healthier the sport is, because then you slowly grow them into fans, and then they
absolutely
buy merchandise, and then all of a sudden, further down the line, 2014 playoff, it's all fun. But no, 8 teams is the way to go. I could even see one where if you told me there was a 9-team playoff and you had like a play-in game for the 8th seed, but I find that kind of interesting. I've also seen some people talk about a 16 playoff where the first 2 teams have a bye, similar to the NFL.
NFL conferences.
It's meh. I think they should take a page. The college football should take a page out of college basketball and just play a little bit of a tournament. Play an 8-team tournament. That's fine. Don't want to let 64 teams in. Exactly. I understand it, even though 64 teams in college football would be a lot of fun. But I totally get that.
Well, and it's not just college basketball, right? Every other sport we watch has sort of a blown up 8 to 12, 16 playoff bracket, 16-team playoff bracket. So it's high time that we've gotten to that point. Also, quick shout out to the longtime IU football fans. I know, the Hoosiers picked up a lot of bandwagon followers over the course of the last year or two, and understandably so. And if you are one of those, then, stay on, because next year's going to be just as good, if not better. But, for guys that have followed this team, and you can find them on social media or whatever, that have really supported the Hoosiers football team through some really rough years and rough decades and really rough century, I really do feel for them. The people who have stuck with it through Indiana, constantly churning out 3, 4, 5 win seasons. Just wanted to give them a shout out, because I know all of this has been really frustrating for all IU fans, but especially those that have followed this team for a long time. So let's put a bow on that. College football can maybe sit on the back burner for another week or two. Of course, we'll preview the Outback Bowl against Ole Miss. It's the first time we actually mentioned that game and that opponent. That's who IU's got on January 2nd at 12:30 Eastern on ABC. Indiana's going to play Ole Miss. IU's a 7-point favorite. Ole Miss is 4-5. The Hoosiers are going to win by 100, but we'll get to that game next week on the Hoosier Sound. It's time for Who Won the Week, and this one's easy. Raptors forward and former Indiana Hoosier front court member OG Anunoby signed a 4-year, $72 million extension with the Raptors. What a story. He's the guy who went scoreless multiple times in his freshman year, something like 8, 9, 10 games in his first year at IU. He really improved during his time in Bloomington, got drafted by the Raptors in the first round, was a key member of their NBA title team a couple years ago, was even better in their playoff run last season, and now he's getting paid like someone who really deserves that money. He got that bank, 4 years, $72 million once again. I mean, I know you follow the NBA quite a bit, Matt. OG Anunoby is undoubtedly one of the most respected sort of two-way forwards, at least in the Eastern Conference.
Absolutely. He's turned into one of the best 3D guys, as Nithin said, two-way players, and like a glue guy in the NBA, and I think that's great for him. I would really like him to pay me back for opening the door multiple times for him. I also helped him out a couple times in sport communication. I would really enjoy a Rolex or two for that.
Interesting.
Maybe a Christmas present, like I'm part of the team. No, I'm really proud of him. He's actually a really good guy, and everything in life he works for really hard. So it's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And over on IndianaHQ.com, keep an eye out for an article in the coming days about Hoosier pros and how much they make at the next level. Which guys that went to IU are making millions and millions right now, whether it's football, basketball, whatever. Keep an eye out for that over on IndianaHQ.com. And remember, if you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Could be Apple, could be Google, could be wherever. Stay up to date with all of your information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ or at the Hoosier Sound. So let's switch gears here, Matt. We got a lot of basketball to talk about. The men's basketball team is doing more and more here, and the heat is turning up. Okay, Big Ten play has come upon us. But first, let's recap that game on Saturday where Indiana knocked off Butler 68-60. It was a fight. It was a bit of a grinding situation that first half where Butler took a 9-point lead and held a 5-point halftime advantage. But IU really turned the screws defensively and ended up winning by 8. Trace Jackson Davis at 21 points, 8 rebounds, 5 blocks. Armand Franklin scored 20, setting a new career high. Armand Franklin might as well just find a room to rent in Bankers Life Fieldhouse because he pretty much owns that place now. So, what were your main takeaways, Matt? Indiana's now 5-2. They got that nice non-conference win under their belt. What stood out for you in IU's 8-point win?
Yeah, I mean, I can just take this as what has stood out to me in our non-conference schedule, right? We broke this down when we started the season. If you want to go back and listen to the podcast, what we talked about, we said we'd be happy with 5-2. We end up 5-2. We lost on a buzzer beater at Florida State in a heartbreaker, and we got our teeth kicked in by somebody I think is going to be a top 4 team and probably a Final Four team in Texas. I think they will win the Big 12 this year. I think they will beat Kansas this year for the Big 12 title, and Baylor. Those are 2 really, really good teams, and I really like Texas a lot from what I've seen from them recently. So it was a good game, and IU played decently. This offense has some holes in it. The defense at times, it has some lapses.
Right.
When we pride ourselves on defense.
Right.
But we're a top 10 palm in defensive rating, our defensive efficiency, which is where we want to be as a program. And we're like not in the hundreds in offensive efficiency. I think we're around the 40s, right? Are we 44th or 45th?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Right. And offensive efficiency. And we have a National Player of the Year candidate in Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah,
we are going to have a good year. It's a deep conference. This Big Ten is ridiculous. We will get some great wins, and we could very much, we're going to talk about Northwestern in a minute, lose to Northwestern at some point. Hopefully not at home, maybe away. Maybe might lose out of Nebraska away. It's very possible that a team that we don't think can knock us off will knock us off, and that we will knock off a team we don't think will have a shot at. Wisconsin's having trouble with Nebraska right now. Penn State doesn't look too bad.
No, they don't.
They did beat a very good Virginia Tech team.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan looks tough. Purdue is Purdue and always gives us trouble because they're Purdue.
Yep.
Rutgers is in the top 15, almost top 10. Like the Big Ten is ridiculously deep this year. Michigan State just lost to Northwestern as well. So, but back to the Butler game, since I've given my overall thoughts.
Yeah.
Armand, great game. Like you said, he should definitely. I don't know if he should just sleep or we should just move Assembly Hall for this year to Indy. Just or tell him that when he steps into Assembly Hall, that he's stepping onto Bankers Life South,
right?
Because maybe he'll start shooting better in Assembly Hall. But no, his team looks really confident shooting the 3 as of recently. Trace Jackson Davis, 21, 8, 5 blocks.
Yep.
And I didn't think he had his best game, and he's got 21, 8, and 5. Like he's a player that IU has been wanting for a while. We had it with Juwan Morgan, who I thought could have been an All-American at some point in his career. We now have a Trace Jackson Davis. It's up to the rest of this team if they want to elevate their game, because we could very much be in shot of having a top 5 finish in the Big Ten. I don't think that's out of the question now, the way this team has played to start the season.
I agree, and the one sentence I would use to summarize the Big Ten is anyone can win any game, any night, especially because the bottom's not that bad and the top isn't that good. I mean, it's not like Wisconsin or Iowa can't make a run in the tournament. They definitely can, and even an Illinois team that Indiana will face next weekend. But anyone can win any game, any day of the week. We saw it last Sunday with Northwestern winning, and as far as Indiana's concerned, Trace Jackson Davis is in the running for one of sort of the most impactful Hoosiers to play really in the last, 10, 15 years. I mean, you're talking about a guy Okay, I know you talk about people like Victor Oladipo and Cody Zeller and Jawan Morgan and Yogi Ferrell. Trace Jackson Davis in 1.2 seasons is starting to show that he's getting to that level. And, if he can hit a jump shot once or twice a game and really stretch that defense out even a little more, I mean, wow, the ceiling is truly unlimited for a guy like Jackson Davis. But Franklin is someone who, Armand Franklin is someone who we have been desperately looking for in Bloomington, someone who can develop during his time here at IU and then gain that confidence shooting the three ball. He was 5 of 7 against Butler from beyond the arc. I fully expect to, I've already raised the standard for Armand Franklin now. He is no longer somebody who can go out and score 0 or 2 or 3 or 4 points in a game. He's someone that has to be relied upon, perhaps as Indiana's best perimeter player in Big Ten season, because that's where we are now as Indiana finishes non-conference 5-2. I agree with you that the non-conference season at least met, I would even say slightly exceeded expectations for me as far as looking at the Hoosiers. Again, they played one of the toughest, if not the toughest, non-conference schedule in the Big Ten, and they can now proudly say they hold wins over Providence, Stanford, and Butler in non-conference play, and you also include those 2 games. And then you also include those 2 games against Florida State and Texas, which will look good on the resume when Selection Sunday comes around. So that's where we're at from Indiana's game last Saturday against Butler. Let's take a quick break into a social media shout out. Matt, the IU football players took to Twitter after the bowls were handed out on Sunday. I know something caught your attention from that evening.
Yeah, Jalen Williams tweeted out, "What, we should have played the Avengers?" I mean, sheesh. And yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate that you didn't have to play the Monstars, right? I don't understand, but they are obviously allowed to be frustrated. They're rightfully frustrated, and I can't wait for them to see them take out their frustrations on a hapless Ole Miss team. So go IU. If you want to follow us on Twitter. There's Nithin and I when we talk. Our Twitter handles are down there. If you want to follow Indiana HQ and the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, it's at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, at Indiana HQ on Twitter. It's Indiana.HQ on Instagram, and it's Indiana HQ on Facebook. Go follow us wherever you want to hang out and talk to us.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now let's look ahead. We've got a Big Ten basketball matchup. The opener in conference play comes to you Wednesday night. I know a lot of you will be listening to this on Wednesday, so it even could be later this evening as Indiana takes on Northwestern. The Wildcats beat number 4 Michigan on Sunday. Explain that one. And not only did they win, it wasn't a nail biter. It wasn't a gut buster. It wasn't a butt cheek clencher. It was a 14-point domination of the Spartans, at least relatively. When you think about what people were expecting going into that game, the Wildcats had to lead basically wire to wire, outplaying a Michigan State team that looked just confused and frankly incompetent at times in that game. It's the first, like I said, it's the opener for IU in Big Ten play, and Indiana is the final Big Ten team to play a conference game. So that's right, the 14th out of 14 teams to play a conference game. That's the Hoosiers. It's at Simon Scott Assembly Hall, where Indiana is an 8-point favorite. And the over-under is 139, so quick math, Vegas is predicting something like a 74-66, 73-65 type final score. Northwestern went 8-23 last year. They were 3-17 in conference play. They're already on their way to matching that record in conference play this season. They're the 57th ranked team in KenPom, so a top 60 KenPom team. And KenPom has them as a 13th best Big Ten squad right now, which just goes to show how deep this conference is. The Wildcats were 132 in that metric system last year, so they've moved up about 60, 70 spots in the KenPom ratings from last year to this season. Indiana beat Northwestern last year 66-62. The Wildcats play a little bit faster this season. Matt, as you look at this matchup, Northwestern's got guys like Boo Buie who dropped 30 on Michigan State. Miller Kopp is a solid player. What are you looking for, whether it's from the IU perspective, or what should we look out for from the Northwestern side if Indiana wants to win this game, especially comfortably?
I mean, I'm going to say something that's going to scare a lot of IU fans, and that's zone defense. Northwestern has turned into Syracuse West I just want to point that out because the way they are playing this year, the way Chris Collins has them playing, and what they did against Michigan State was they confused the hell out of Michigan State. They went into a zone and they said, shoot it over us, Michigan State, which is something that's terrifying for an IU team that is known to have lapses in shooting quality. However, I think the difference between IU and Michigan State is that IU has practiced against the zone in that every team's, for some reason, actually, I know the reason, uses it against us. We saw it in the Florida State game. We saw it against Butler. We can play our way around the zone. You can pass around the zone. Michigan State looked like a hapless team the other night because they couldn't pass around the zone and they didn't have a reliable big man downstairs to kind of collapse the pressure down to make those open shots even easier for Michigan State. And Michigan State's a team that usually relies on having a solid point guard and a experienced big man. Both of those things are not the case at Michigan State this year with the loss they had in Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman. So looking at Michigan State, it's kind of obvious why they lost to Northwestern, even though it's a bit of a shocker. IU defensively is going to need to run them off the three-point line. They shoot the ball pretty well. You have Miller Kopp, who shot 40% from three last year. He's 10 of 20 so far this year, which is 50%, if you can't do the math, which is pretty good. They have a lot of really good athletes, too. So even when we run them off the line, we're going to, make sure that the pack line is there and to cover and not let in driving lanes because, Pete Nance, Larry Nance Jr.'s brother, is always looking for an avenue to dunk on somebody. Boo Buie is averaging 15 points per game. He can get a bucket, man. That guy can get a shot and create his own shot. However, we have to live with him, in my opinion, we have to live with him beating us. And by beating us, I mean he's got to score 30 again like he did at MSU against one of our guards that can guard the crap out of him. I'm looking at Finney. I'm looking at Armand Franklin. Yep. Put somebody on him that's going to make it life hard on him. And if he makes a tough shot, if he makes a ridiculous step back two-pointer with a hand in his face, that's fine. We live with that. But we're not going to live with Miller Kopp shooting open three-pointers. If I am an assistant coach, that's my game plan, which is that make sure they're not taking open threes, cover when you need to cover, and if they're going to take tough shots on us and they're going to make it, so be it.
Yeah, and you weren't kidding. Northwestern does force you to shoot the three. Michigan State took 67 field goal attempts in that game against Northwestern on Sunday. Almost half were from beyond the arc. 31 out of 67 shots that Michigan State took were from three-point land because they just didn't have that sort of room inside. And this is where I think Indiana's lucky in that they faced Northwestern in previous years, right? It's a conference opponent. You're familiar with their style of play. Chris Collins has been there for 8 seasons. Indiana knows that if they're going to win, they have to knock down some shots, guard the perimeter. Here's the thing, though. Michigan State doesn't have that excellent interior player or two like Indiana has, at least if you ask me. And that's where Trace Jackson Davis, once again, is a guy who's going to have to put up 20-plus points for Indiana to win. Race Thompson and Jackson Davis are going to have to dominate the boards. It's funny. Michigan State took a bunch of threes, and they only attempted 10 free throws all game. So that goes to show you Northwestern, even though they play pretty quickly, they are disciplined defensively. They don't put you on the free throw line. A lot of times that means, hey, if you get a good possession, you move the ball, and you get the ball inside to a good spot, they'll let you take your 2 points. They're not going to hack you. They're not going to foul you. Inside, they don't have the type of talent that other Big Ten teams do. Guys like Robbie Barron and Pete Nance and Ryan Young, they're all right, definitely belong on a Big Ten court, but it's not at the level you're going to see, say, on Sunday against Illinois. Speaking of which, on Sunday afternoon, Indiana, after their first Big Ten game against Northwestern, the Hoosiers hit the road to Champaign and take on the Fighting Illini. Ken Pom likes Illinois to win this one 74-71. Illinois is number 18 in the AP poll, but 12th in the Ken Pom ratings. Their offense is 7th in the country. Defense is 35th. They play even faster than Northwestern. They really like to get up and down the floor. Illinois last year was an NCAA tournament team, but they didn't get a chance to play in the Big Dance. Their last formal, official, sanctioned NCAA tournament game was way back in 2013. They're going to make it this year, but where? Who knows? We'll see. Last year, the Illini beat IU 67-66 in Champaign. A horrible game to watch just because their officiating was arguably the worst I saw it all year. Indiana is scheduled to rematch Illinois on February 2nd. Matt, you know the stars on that team. It's Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn. How do you expect Indiana to attack those two guys, and what are your thoughts on Indiana's chances of winning this game?
I really like how Indiana matches up against Illinois. I've been adamant of this all year. We can guard the heck out of a playmaking point guard. You saw it with Cassius Winston a couple times. We've seen it when we've played Maryland really close. We just got beat last year by Jalen Smith. It was not their point guard that beat us last year. It was Jalen Smith. So I like for us to hang with Illinois. I think we can keep Ayo in check for the most part. I mean, he's going to get his buckets, but we're going to make him work for it, and he'll be inefficient. And that's what you really want, because from a star player in college basketball is if he's going to get his points, make sure he's inefficient, right? Like when Iowa was playing UNC, or Iowa was playing, I forget, Gonzaga, sorry, not UNC. When Gonzaga, Luka Garza still got his points, but Luka Garza was way under his usual efficiency level. So you want players, if they get their output, but do it at a level in which they're not used to getting. I like our matchup against Ayo Dosunmu, against Kofi Coburn. That's a bit of a tougher matchup for us, I think, because we're not deep at the forward position. Something I wanted to bring up when we talked about the Butler game is we only played 8 players in the Butler game. Usually Archie likes to use more players. Yep. We only played 8. We had Jerome coming on as a 4, which I can tell you has not looked great in the defensive minutes that he's played. And we're still missing Joey Brunk. So I'm really hoping we get Joey back for this game at least, so that we can throw somebody in there to give somebody like Trace Jackson Davis a rest. While also, if he gets in foul trouble, having a life buoy to throw out there just in case something happens, because it's Big Ten officiating and it can go any way and anywhere. So it's going to be a fun matchup to watch, at least for a neutral fan. For us, it's going to be a heart attack. But I really like how we line up, and I think we can give guys like Armand Franklin and Al Durham should have really big games this game, because they're going to be picking on the freshman guards for Illinois in Adam Miller and Andre Curbelo. I think those are two guys that we can attack on offense, get them into dribble drive, into pick and roll situations, on handoff situations, and force them to make a Division I seasoned defensive read. And if they can do that, fine, good job, congratulations. That's why you were a 4-star freshman. Adam Miller, you were almost a 5-star. That's why you're earning minutes at Illinois. But if you can't, which we don't think you will, we're going to get a really good opportunity and a really good chance to score. So
yeah, no, it's really interesting. This Illinois team, again, rightfully sort of considered to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten. They've lost 3 games already this year. They've played a tough schedule. They've played a tough schedule. They had a few cupcakes at the start, which is why I think Ken Pom still has Indiana's non-conference schedule ranked tougher than Illinois'. But the Illini still had to play Baylor, and they went to Cameron Indoor Stadium and beat Duke, but they also lost to Missouri on the road, and they've lost to Rutgers on the road. And so, this is an Illinois team. We talked about how Northwestern plays. Illinois does not take that many threes. So it's kind of the opposite of Northwestern, in that, okay, they play fast, but they like to get the ball inside. They'll take that mid-range jumper if it's there. They only attempted 15 threes in their 3-point loss at Rutgers out of 63 field goal attempts. So that's just a good general idea of saying that, okay, they don't bomb too many shots from distance. What's also interesting, though, is if you want to beat Illinois, it looks like the ways to do it are to get them to turn it over. They are a team that will be a little careless with the ball. And they also don't hit their free throws. It's a bit like the Florida State team Indiana played earlier this year. So if Indiana learns a lot of their lessons from that game, maybe they get a favorable break or two. Like you said, maybe Joey Brunk returns. And again, just to be perfectly clear, we haven't heard any official announcement from IU about Brunk's availability, besides the fact that he's just dealing with something. He hasn't suited up for the Hoosiers yet this year. We'll see what happens. By the way, Illinois plays Penn State on Wednesday night, and they play the game before Indiana Northwestern. So it's possible Illinois loses the 4th game. I mean, Penn State showed that they're a tough out in the Big Ten this year. So, Illinois is an interesting team. It's going to be a long season. It's going to be a grind physically and mentally. Unsurprisingly, that's something we all have become accustomed to over the last few years. Ken Pom, by the way, is projecting Illinois, again, one of the best teams in the Big Ten, to go 12-8 in conference play. So that's exactly an identification as to how hard this conference is going to be. So, Matt, here we go. Prediction time. You can give me score lines if you want, but how, out of the 2 games this week, how many does Indiana come away with victorious? Do they go 2-0 this week, 1-1, or 0-2?
My brain tells me 1-1. My heart tells me 2-0. So I'm going to go with my heart here because I've had the take that we match up well with Illinois since the season started.
I agree.
I'm going to stick with it now. I think we match up well with Illinois. Give me 2-0 this week. I think the Northwestern game is going to be a nail biter. I think it's going to be a lot closer, too close for comfort for a lot of IU fans. And some people are going to think the sky is falling. And then I think we're going to play Illinois extremely close as well. So I think buckle in. You're in for 2 incredibly close games this week.
I'm going to regret this, Matt. I'm going to regret it. I think Indiana's going 2-0 also. I think the Hoosiers are winning both games this week, too. I think they're actually going to handle Northwestern pretty easily simply because Northwestern's on the radar now. After they go out and beat a team like Michigan State, Indiana's going to be wary of the threat that the Wildcats bring to Assembly Hall. And I think Indiana's going to find a way to beat the Illini. It seems like Illinois might have been a little overrated at the start of the season, and they're still a really good team. But this is a matchup where, like you said, I agree. Indiana seems to guard Illinois well at the key spots. Again, Indiana's tough. Indiana's tough inside against Kofi Coburn, and I think they're going to have the personnel to defend Ayo DeSumo up top. How do the supporting actors play in that game will be determined eventually. But I think Indiana's going to do it. I think they're going to start 2-0. I think they're going to get a top 25 win under their belt. And, of course, I bet on Tuesday when we record next week, it's going to look really, 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 really stupid. But anyway, now that we're winding down tonight on the Hoosier Sound, give me some closing thoughts, man. We talked about the entire CFP ranking situation. We talked about the Outback Bowl coming up in a couple weeks. We'll get into detail in that matchup a little bit more next week on the Hoosier Sound. What's on your mind here as we wind down? Big Ten play underway in basketball.
Yeah, I'm excited for Big Ten play. I'm disappointed in the College Football Playoff Committee, obviously. I did talk about how I understood how the rankings went. That doesn't mean I like how they thought about the rankings. Those are 2 different things. I'm looking forward to her game against Ole Miss. I'm looking forward to being there in person. And I think these basketball games this week are going to be fun. You brought up something a little bit earlier, which was, Illinois likes to go fast, but likes to get inside or take mid-range jumpers. That's something I would like to see IU adopt a little bit. For some reason, I think we got a lot of really good mid-range shooters on the team. We talk about no shooting, but I think Armand Franklin, Al Durham, and Rob Finney, those 3 guys, I completely trust them taking mid-range jumpers. And I'm just going off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure they have a pretty good percentage on the mid-range jumpers. I would rather see them take those shots than sometimes where Al and especially for Al and Finney, where they just drive in on 2 defenders and take an awkward layup attempt trying to get a foul. I would rather them shoot over that. They're much better than that. Pull up on that pick and roll and take a jump shot is a lot easier than flailing at the rim. So.
Yeah, no, I like that. And yeah, for me, Matt, I'm fired up for Big Ten basketball season. I mean, it started last Sunday with Penn State, Michigan, and some of the games this week have been amazing to watch. Illinois-Rutgers on Sunday was awesome. Northwestern beating Michigan State later that evening was incredible to watch. The most fierce league in college basketball, according to Archie Miller, and he's not wrong. I mean, there are 13 teams in the top 60. I believe 9 in the top 30, according to Ken Pom. And even Nebraska, the team that's bringing up the rear end of Big Ten's, ranked somewhere in the 110, 120 range. This league is going to be relentless this season. It's going to be as tough as it's ever been, just because you don't have that killer team at the top. and you don't have a really bad team down at the bottom. So, tomorrow there's a triple header of Big Ten action. That's Wednesday night for those of you listening, whenever you're listening. I mean, Rutgers, Ohio State, Illinois, Penn State, and then capped off by Northwestern, Indiana. And then on Christmas Day, there are 4 games basically back to back to back to back. Happy holidays, folks. Big Ten basketball season is here. But that about wraps it up for our 174th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You guys are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find everything in one place. Lastly, if you enjoyed our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always,